Hello everyone, I'm Zach.
And I'm Britton, and today on Review Crew, we will be reviewing the second movie in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, Dead Man's Chest.
And Dead Man's Chest, of course, following the first film, is all about Jack Sparrow, who's now needing to deal with the repercussions of making a deal with Davy Jones to have his Black Pearl ship, and now, in a way to try and avoid that deal, he is now on the search for the Dead Man's Chest containing the heart of Davy Jones. Now, we chose the second one because, generally speaking, a lot of people agree that the first one is a very good movie, right?
Yes.
But the sequels are where it gets a little more polarized, so we thought it would be fun to review Dead Man's Chest instead. So, Britton, this is your first review. What are your thoughts on this movie?
Well, without spoiling too much of my rating at the end, this is my favorite film in the franchise. And I think it does everything a sequel in such a big series needs to do, right? It ups the scale of the world, it introduces new characters, it takes big risks, and I think it does all of that very effectively. Now, the main reason why it's better than the first for me is Davy Jones. And this is a character who's held up as one of the greatest examples of CGI we've ever seen. And even 20 years later, like, we don't see these types of visuals in cinema very often, but I think for me, what makes him such a great character is the writing and the acting. And Bill Nye, love him in About Time and Love Actually. This is a completely different performance, obviously. He's great as Davy Jones, of course, but also the writing. Like, on the surface, Davy Jones is a character who's just so maniacal. Obviously, he's condemning these souls to like an eternity of servitude. Like, he's the most horrible creature ever. But he has this touch of humanity. And the audience can sympathize with him because really, his backstory, he's just a guy who fell in love with the wrong girl. Now, locking his heart in a chest is certainly a decision, but I think that that level of humanity that Davy Jones has gives the character some complexity, which makes him even better for me.
Now, without a doubt, the characterization is still a strong point to this film, and of course, the introduction to new characters and new actors, of course, with Stellan Skarsgård playing Bootstrap Bill, and of course Bill Nighy. I believe you said Bill Nye, but Bill Nighy.
I honestly don't know how to pronounce his name.
But yes, his performance as Davy Jones was absolutely, like for a sequel, they did need to take a step up from Captain Barbossa, and I think they did that really well because he is a very intimidating character. Do you fear death?
First line he says, by
First
the way.
line, yes. But it's a really it's a line that just punches you.
Mm-hmm. Powerful, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And without a doubt, I mean, special effects are very strong with this film, and I think the film did deserve its Oscar win for best visual effects because you could easily look at Davy Jones and be like, man, we don't see that kind of visual effects in movies nowadays because it is very impressive with how they artistically rendered him, as well as also the Kraken, which is a big part of the special effects too.
And I love the scenes with him where he's just like playing the organ on his ship, and he has that song that's like kind of a reflection of his love for Calypso. But that theme is great too. And you talked about Bootstrap Bill, Stellan Skarsgård. I think what makes this franchise as a whole so good is these side characters are casted so well, and it makes even those kind of side quest adventure scenes so engaging. Naomi Harris is Calypso. Only a couple scenes in this movie, but I think she's also excellent.
She is, of course, and of course her character gets expanded upon a lot in At World's End.
Yes.
But yeah, there is a lot of strong points to just how the characters. I think the characters were arguably one of the biggest strong points of the movie. But of course, cinematography was still beautiful, as was costume design and set design, because they really wanted to make this film authentic, right? Just like the first one. And they ended up spending like a huge budget on this film. At the time that this film was released, it was the most expensive film ever made. I believe it was $350 million, somewhere around there. But that's because they were filming most of their scenes on islands in the Caribbean Sea.
Yeah.
And another thing that didn't help, which I didn't know originally, and a lot of people may not know, is that this film's production actually went through Hurricane Wilma.
Really?
Yeah. So, and right in the middle of if you're filming in the Caribbean, there were a lot of setbacks that the production of this film faced. So it definitely deserves some kudos, the fact that it came out, at least in the form that it did, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. One question I did have, right? This is a 2.5 hour movie. Each of the first three get longer in length as you go.
Yes.
And I think one main critique a lot of people have with this one specifically is there's a lot of large set piece scenes on like these side adventures that sometimes the plot feels like a convoluted mess. That's not how I feel, of course, but the scene where they're on the island with the indigenous people, right? The huge sword fight on the spinning wheel. Those types of things, it can drag out. I can see why some people feel like these movies are too long and too boring. I'm wondering how you feel about the pacing.
Well, this is where I do have to sympathize with the critics in some ways, because the beginning of the film, I honestly think that the biggest flaw of the film is the whole opening act, I feel
Yeah.
like. Because I felt like there were times during the beginning where the pacing was a little weird, to the point where some of the character dialogue felt like it wasn't delivered in the way that was most emotionally realistic for, the situations that the characters were in. And I think part of that could just be because of the fact that, I mean, this was a huge, ambitious story, spanning 2 whole movies that, combined to, over like 5.5 hours in total. But because of that, it felt like they were, I don't know, moving a little quickly in the beginning. And also in terms of the native tribe on the cannibals on that island, that was another thing where I personally, it did not sit well with me, that scene, because it felt like it just completely wandered off from where the narrative was taking us.
Yeah,
because
fair.
it doesn't, really grow on any of the plot at all. It's really just a scene that's in there for, humor, comedic purposes and theatrics and all that, and not actually, developing the story. And it's like, why is the narrative getting sidetracked only 20 minutes into the film? So it kind of, when you're trying to get immersed at the beginning of the film, having a scene that kind of curts you off like that just didn't sit well with me. And I think that may be why the critics can be a bit harsh on this film, because, the tomato meter is like 53%, which of course you don't agree with. But I think that's why, is because when you have a start like that and then you have to watch the rest of the movie, I feel like their perception was a little sullied because of the opening. So when they see a scene like a sword fight occurring on a water wheel, they're like, okay, really? And I think that's where I can sympathize with the critics.
And I can certainly acknowledge that scenes like those definitely aren't necessary for the plot, but they're a lot of fun. Like just that indigenous sequence alone had so many like moments where you're just at least for me, huge smile on my face. I'm enjoying my time with this movie. I think we've established I'm a little higher on it. What are some of your other maybe negatives?
Well, I think to your point is that it really depends on like what you were coming into this film expecting, because this film, I think that if you were watching it as like a family action film, then yeah, it's an okay film. But I think part of the problem is also that there is the direct comparison to Curse of the Black Pearl.
Yeah.
And I think, like, in terms of the humor, because the humor is campy at times,
It is.
I got Georgia, things like that.
I think it plays its role for me. It does the job.
But personally, for me, I think in comparison to the first film, I think Curse of the Black Pearl did a lot better in terms of balancing the humor and keeping it like a serious movie, I think the first film just did it a lot better, whereas the second film, it kind of felt a little weird. And that's what I thought.
The first film is definitely a tighter story, but for me, overall, this is Johnny Depp, Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley operating at the highest of levels with these huge set pieces. So much fun. I hit Davy Jones, of course. To get into ratings, and you can explain why once it's your turn, but I could be convinced this is a 9 out of 10. Now I'm gonna go with an 8 out of 10 and be a little bit, I'm gonna bring it down a little bit. I think 9's a little bit too crazy, ignoring maybe some of the negatives like you're saying, but I'll go with a final 8 out of 10.
Okay. Well, yeah, honestly, with me looking at this film, I was really stuck between a 7 or a 6 when
Okay.
I was watching it. And honestly, I feel like I'm going to have to do something that I never do, which is go into decimals, and I'm going to say 6.5.
Wow.
6.5 is
Wow.
going to be my final
Just make
rating.
a choice. Which way would you lean if you had to pick between a 7 and a 6?
I would honestly lean to a 6.
Wow.
Because I
That's
think the
disappointing.
beginning did distract me. It was messing with my immersion, so there was some issues with it, but after the whole native tribe, the film kind of returned to the same immersion and pacing that the first film had. So yeah, I just can't ignore that flaw. That's all.
We have a little bit of contrasting opinions, but regardless, thank you guys for watching. That was our review of Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest.
Good job. Very much enjoyed it.
Did you? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was gonna
No,
say,
I
did you learn?
I did enjoy it. You guys just